friends, so I hope we have covered all these sections of this particular um, part of Python series. So because now with this session we are going to end on the control flow, right? So remember guys, when we started with the control flow, we started with the if statement, and we followed up with uh, else and elif statements. Then we actually concluded with while loops, for loops, right? And in the last couple of sessions we also saw about the break statement and continue statement. There's one more piece left out, that is pass statement. We are going to see some of the examples how we are going to use the pass statement in this session, right? All right, guys, I'll see you in the session, okay, in the class. Thank you. Welcome back, ProITians. So let's continue with our session on pass statement. So pass statement is used as a placeholder, and it is used to avoid an error when an empty code is not allowed in loops, function definitions, and class definitions. Yeah, I know, I mean, we have not yet covered function definitions and class definitions up to now, which we will be covering in the future sessions. But for now, keep a note that for you will use pass statements in those sort of scenarios, right? Let me give you an example. For example, if we use the codes like a is equals to 5 and b is equals to 9, if a is greater than b, perform this part of the loop, else you perform the other part of the loop, right? But in pass statement, for example, you don't want to perform any function if or else. So what you would do is a equals to 5, b is equals to 9. If a is greater than b, then pass. So what happens in this scenario? So as you can see, pass is a null statement where no action is performed. So there will be no action performed on those codes, right? Alright, so consider that we have a loop or a function that is to be implemented in a future part of the code, okay? And if that code is an empty body, right, then those errors will not be, I mean, it will not throw any errors, right? So, I mean, the print interpreter will know that, okay, fine, I mean, the code is, can be passed for now, and it will be referred in the future later on, in case if you are building up the code later on, right? So if we use pass statement to construct a body to handle such conditions by doing nothing, then it actually solves that purpose, right? Right, okay, let's look at some of the examples, okay? All right, so here is the example. If a is equals to 35 and b is equals to 200, if b greater than a colon, pass, right? Now what happens in this code? As soon as it comes to pass, right? For example, if I do hash here, okay, if I comment it here, okay, I do control S and I hit on F5 to execute this code, what happens? I immediately get an error, correct? Because it's actually waiting for the next part of the code if and other functions or the loops, right, after the colon sign. But we are not yet ready for that part. So what we can do is we can click on, we can key in as pass, and now you see what happens. Control S for save, function F5, and as you can see, I was able to execute the code without any error, because now the interpreter knows as soon as I hit, to that line of the code with pass, it will skip and it will move out, right? All right, let's look at the real-time example. Okay, we'll have a look on the almost similar code which we used in the continue statement, right? All right, so here is the code. for the which we use for the continuous statement, and I've made some changes here. I'll explain you where, and accordingly we'll see the output, right? Okay, so let me run you through the code. As usual, we have this dot string which gives us short summary of the requirement for this code, right? So it will actually prompt for a user to input two numbers, one lower and the another one is going to be the upper. And yes, it is going to have a banner where it says that this program will be this program will be used to give the numbers which are divisible by 5, right? Okay, so again, n1, it will take the input from the user for the lower range number and it will convert into int. N2 again, enter higher range number and it will convert into int, right? So we will have two different n1s and n2 variables with some values as an integer, right? Now it actually performs a print function where it says all numbers divisible by 5 between n1 and n2, n1 to n2, right? So n1 and n2, so whatever numbers which are divisible by 5, it is going to come after this line. So it's just the statement that it will print on the screen, right? So here is now the loop which actually is used, right? So if n1 is not equal to n2, right, then, and as you can see, all this is part of your nested loop, right? So we are starting with the if loop, right? So if n1 not equals to n2 colon, right, and then we can see that indentation part also, right? So expression is equals to range n1 and then n2 plus n1, right? So why n2 plus 1? Because we know by now, because we know that we want to include the number which is the high range number that will be provided by user. So and also we know that by default Python will skip that number, right? The upper number will be skipped by default, right? But if we want to include that number, we are adding +1 to it, right? And also we know that we are using n1 n2 plus 1 and then we can use 1, but we know that by default Python will actually increment the value 1, right? And it will start with 0 by default, right? If n1 is not defined, then it will start with 0, correct? So that is by default. So since it is by default, we don't need to worry about typing the extra keywords in the code, right? Okay, great. So expression equals range n1 n2 plus 1, and for I in expression that is exp, yeah, colon, if I is divisible by 5 is not equals to 0, then pass, right? So it is not going to do anything for the numbers which are not divisible by 5, okay? So otherwise it will, if we don't do it, it will actually ask for the next argument like print number is not divisible by 5, and it will continue with that, right? It will continue for each number with increment of 1, correct? Because that is by default as part of the range, right? Okay, so here it is going to pass, then it is going to go to the next loop. Once this part is done, and it is going to go to the next loop saying print I is divisible by 5, because since we're using I here, we're using F character to have the form feed of that code and in the printout, right? Okay, great. So, and once we exit out of this loop, then actually it happens like that we need to we will get the output as print thank you, have a nice day, have a great day, right? And then if this particular statement is wrong, is equal to n2 or greater and all those things, right, then it will actually if that this statement is false, then it is going to execute this part, that is else there was no valid range, right? All right, great. So Let's try to execute this code. I know we will be asked to save the code before it can be executed, because we made some changes by keying comma 1 here. So that was the change which was done, and we reverted that change. But still, if we click on F5, it will say okay, you want to save the program before it can be executed, right? So I click on OK, and we are on our screen. Great. And let me maximize this window, right? Okay, great. So let me key in the number 2 and 20. Okay, and now since we have put into plus 1, so definitely this number will also be considered, right? We'll see in a moment. Hit enter. All numbers divisible by 5 between 2 and 2 to 20, 5, 10, 15 and 20, right? And then it prints thank you, have a great day, right? So we can do some reverse engineering out here by looking at the code and looking at the output, right? Okay, great. So enter two numbers, lower range 2, upper range 20, and then all numbers divisible by 5 between 2 and 220, and then it actually lists out the number which is divisible by 5, and for the numbers which are not divisible by 5, it is actually going as a pass, right? And the numbers which are divisible over 5, it actually is actually getting printed out, right? 5, 10, 15 and 20 is divisible by 5, right? And then it actually executes thank you, have a great day. All right, great. We can also try, okay, let me close this window. We can also try by by giving the same output, right? Giving the same value for n1 and n2, right? Let's try it out and see what is the output of it. Okay, great. So let me maximize this window, and I gave 5 and I give 5. What happens? Yeah, so in that case there are no valid range. Why? Because we made the statement here, isn't it, where this code, this part of the loop will only be executed if n1 is not equal to n2, right? Since n1 and n2 are equal, isn't it? That's why we were able to, that's why the code was executed, skipped this part of the code and actually jumped to this part, right? Where it actually printed there was no valid range. All right, great. I hope you guys were enjoying these sessions, and I hope you were able to follow along quite nicely, isn't it? Right? Python is very easy. Only thing that we need to be sure of is practicing. Right? You need to practice as much as possible. Create your own scenarios, write your own codes, right? And then, in case if you're getting stuck, you can write to me on the comment section, and I will revert back to you with the right answer to that. Right? Great. Great. Until next time, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.